This is B of the Baby Angel Geronimo editions of Khoodeelaar television channel, being broadcast only on the internet, not on real, not on cable networks. This is going to be continuing what we introduced in part A few minutes ago, a detailed look at the corruption called the local council mayor, foisted under the provisions introduced by the war criminal, Tony Blair, who created the first post of elected mayor at the expense of London, over which he, as the then incumbent Labour Party, had got himself in a battle with and shall come to that update overdue in the next 2 minutes. Now, when Ken Livingston Livingstone contested the just newly created post and wanted to become the candidate for the Labour Party officially, he was vetoed by Tony Blair. That resulted in Tony Blair having to foist as Labour Party candidate against the then independent candidate Ken Livingston Livingstone, the most unsuitable, useless candidate called Frank Dobson. Frank Dobson turned out to be an idiot in relation to Tower Hamlets years later. That I'll come to in due course, not at this stage of this commentary. The between Tony Blair and Ken Livingstone ended with Ken Livingstone took place in 2020. Sorry, 2000. The quite okay in London to vote for Ken Livingstone. Blair then changed his hostility to Ken Livingstone Livingstone and allowed him to become the official Labour Party candidate for Mayor of London at the 2004 mayoral election, which Livingstone was able to win as well. Now, Livingstone was the person that had been parading himself as the Mr. London ever since the Greater London Council had been scrapped by the conservative Margaret Thatcher in the middle of the 1980s, where Ken Livingstone had been the leader of the cabal that had seized control of the Labour group, the victorious Labour group that won the May 1981 election for the Greater London Council by ousting Andrew McIntosh from Haringey. Now, I witnessed all these shenanigans and criminality firsthand. And as a result of my witnessing these shenanigans firsthand, my determination to raise questions about the suitability of Ken Livingstone as a self-styled Mr. London was consolidated, which meant that over the 3 or 4 years during which Ken Livingstone pitted the GLC collectively against the central government regime fronted by Margaret Thatcher, I was able to raise objections on hundreds of occasions against Ken Livingstone's self-promoting propaganda events and stunts. That became my main engagement, if you like, in addition to my job as the community representative elected by the community with the highest votes in any of the boroughs to become a member of the Inner London Education Authority's committees, including the biggest committee anywhere in Western Europe over schools, which is the schools subcommittee, where I went on to confront the rest of the committee over their dishonesty and their corruption and their racism and their subservience and criminality. So these are actual recorded facts. So I am an expert on Ken Livingstone. I am the expert, empirical expert on Ken Livingstone as a dishonest individual who is unsuitable for democracy. And also, I am the advocate for democracy on a scale that is not found in any other individual's campaigns anywhere in Western Europe. So when I say that the foisting of the corrupt post of the elected mayor is a bad thing, I don't speak loosely. I don't speak on hunch. I speak on empirical evidence. And if the man that was paid at least £5,000 per hour just to be on the list as Boris Johnson's licensed law trading advisor, based on the work that I have done, the impact and the consequences of my work, my rate on hourly basis should be at least 4 times that of David Pennick, which means I'm owed and have been owed literally billions of pounds over the years for my work, my time, and my expertise. Now, when I spoke to the people that were supposedly opposing the elected mayor system in Tower Hamlets in 2009 and 2010. Obviously, I spoke with the evidence that I've just briefly referred to. No one anywhere else had that same experience, let alone among the electorates in Tower Hamlets. But I have always been, and I am, extremely generous in sharing my expertise without making too much of it. So when I spoke to these people, on the basis that I would only accept their claim that they were opposed to the mayor system on the basis that they were telling the truth. I could not make them tell the truth. I could only assume that they told the truth and they would be telling the truth. I would not they would the truth remains unchanged. One of the nightmare things that any miniature dictatorship foisted on a local community is inevitable is when the majority of the people, of the electors, that is, the people who are relied on as the voters, are politically ignorant, opposing the imposition of the mayor system, they turned out to be mainly self seeking individuals or short sighted individuals, and individuals including the dishonestly opportunistic careerists, who included, quote, Lever group leader on called Ellie, the campaign allegedly run by the Labour Group and Owners Council, as opposed to Hamlet's population. Abbasuddin alias Halal was the one that was and was or claiming to be acting as the source of the agenda for the campaign. Now, Abbas So this edition is going to be jointly parts B and part C because of the interruption that happened a few minutes ago. So going back to the issue of having an elected mayor in Tower Hamlets, the previous or a former Labour group leader on Tower Hamlets Council called Abbas Uddin Elias Halal has had over exaggerated ambitions to become a leading political post holder. And that is fine, except that the particular circumstances in Tower Hamlets, where the demography and the electorate is crucial to Abbasuddin or anybody else's career, in order to get the sustained support of the electorate involved, the particular candidate like Tower Hamlets Labour Group then leader, Abbasuddin Ali Salal had to convince people not by word of mouth but by action that he was reliable. On the occasion of the 2009 and 2010 referendum campaign launched by criminals operating from the base at the East London Mosque or the London Muslim Centre in the Whitechapel Road, as partly exposed by Andrew Gilligan in the Dispatches program on Channel 4 television, broadcast on the 1st of March 2010. They actually had created a kind of corrupt contract for election based wrongly and totally anti-Islamic kind of agreement among the Musallis, the people who attend the prayers in the mosque, that it was their religious duty to vote for whoever the cabals would nominate as their candidate for the post of elected mayor. And as became obvious from Richard Morey's examination of the corrupt behavior revealed during the hearing of allegations against Lutfur Rahman between February and April 2015. People like the Ford Square, London E1, former leading Imam Shamsul Haq, discredited the idea of affiliation, electoral affiliation, to any candidate based on alleged requirements of Islam. There is absolutely no requirement in Islam to engage in secular electoral kind of practices by claiming that the preference for a particular candidate A or B or C would have to be linked to the faith, because these elections are not held for Islamic purposes. Full stop. And secondly, none of the candidates could remotely be called fit for purpose to deliver the ethics, the morality, the transparency, the honesty, the universality that is required or that are required by full compliance with the requirements of Islam. So Shamsul Haq was exposed as a liar, an imam of the East London based Fort Square Mosque, being exposed publicly in the course of a hearing of a petition against the incumbent at that time, Mayor Lutfur Rahman, could not be more discreditable. As if Shamsul Haq's exposure was not bad enough, there was the other so-called Muslim crook. Can you believe this? This crook was given a platform by Gordon Brown's establishment, by his making, Paula Monzila-Uddin, a baroness. Now, Paula Monzila-Uddin was a complete crook right from the word go. But the white racists preferred her. Why? Because she was a woman. Now look at the fucking liars. They thought that any Muslim coming from the Bangladeshi community in Tower Hamlets had to be preferred to any Muslim man, any Muslim woman, that is. And so they gave her all the backing that they could muster or mistress, and convinced the regime, the brief regime, fronted by the idiot Gordon Brown, who proceeded to nominate her as a PRS, Labour PRS, in the House of Peers. Now, on top of, and in addition to the exposure of Shamsul Haq from the former kind of platform of Fort Square Mosque, came evidence that was quite easy to find of Paula Monzila-Uddin having stolen money by pretending to be resident at one address, whereas her actual residence was somewhere else. The details of the Paula Monzila-Uddin corruption are still accessible on the internet by searching the reports that were mainly published by the Times newspaper. None of these things could be anticipated because these things were going to happen by these people behaving corruptly. When I registered my opposition to the idea of an elected mayor in Tower Hamlets, but the so-called opposition meeting organized at the Greater X Street Business Center didn't hear from me. Why? Because the crooks that wanted to be heard were given the spot, and all of these crooks lacked the basic depth of understanding and the basic commitment or record, but they were the ones that spake. One speaker, a former Labour councillor, was observed as drinking so many glasses of water that the observer who actually reported this after the event to me was forced to wonder why this individual was drinking so many glasses of water. And according to this observer, it wasn't my observation, but it was this observer who told me. He said to me, Baisab, that is brother, the fact that you stood so near him made him so nervous that he would have a heart attack. So he kept drinking. I have no idea whether there was a correlation between the two. But the fact that I was there and the are speaking must have made all the criminals very uneasy. Because all the fucking crooks were absolute crooks and they were not dedicated to opposing the mayor system. They were dedicated to their careers, whatever the extent of their careerism. And they were inspired, if you like, that is the word, to oppose the elected mayor system because somebody in the Awami League of Sheikh Hasina in Bangladesh had decided to instruct its morons and zombies operating as Awami League cheerleaders from the United Kingdom population, although most of them carried natural citizenship. These fuckers were told to oppose the mayor system because the mayor system was being proposed by the likes of George Git Galloway. And the reason why Sheikh Hasina was uncomfortable with George Git Galloway was simple because Git Galloway was in alignment, in alliance with the so-called Muslim elements in the population in Tower Hamlets. And by definition, those elements were opposed to Sheikh Hasina's image, etc., etc. So all of these things are totally artificial, not really rigorous. In any case, when it came to having public discussions or public meetings on the question of whether having an elected mayor was bad for the community or good, Abbasuddin Elias Halal exposed himself as a total and utter moron and a liar. He decided to chair the event in March. This is March. And in March 2010, held at the Brady Center. And what Abbasuddin Elias Halal did in the course of the length of that so-called meeting, which lasted just about an hour, was to divide the chairing of the meeting among 4 people plus himself. And he only very reluctantly agreed to give me a spot at the very end when most of the people had left. So the dishonesty of Abbasuddin Halal was not going to leave him. He was doomed to be condemned as the most unsuitable person for the post, and he never got it. As if his behavior to stop me, because he wanted to stop me because he knew that I was the only speaker that would speak on the evidence and on the actual implications and on the benefit and the kind of disservice and the detriment that having such a corrupt post would bring in relation to the whole community in Tower Hamlets. And Abbasuddin Elias Halal had the agenda to actually keep the post on the table so that he would become the candidate. And that's where Frank, the idiot Dobodobson, comes in. Frank Dobodobson allegedly was an intelligent person with some linguistic flair about French, etc., etc. But when it came to Tower Hamlets, he was treated not by the population in Tower Hamlets, but by Abbasuddin Elias Halal as his political father and as his political mentor and more. Why? Because early in his so-called career as a petty employee in Camden, where Frank Dobodobson represented the constituency, Abbasuddin Elias Halal was picked up as an ethnic kind of stooge for ethnic promotions. And Abbasuddin Elias Halal, befitting the mental slave profile, would be more than over grateful for the slightest benefit that he was given by a white skinned individual. Contrasted with that, no matter how highly moral, ethical, any advice coming from the community, Bangladeshis, that he claimed to represent otherwise, Abbasuddin alias Halal would show two fingers or obstruct as he did me. So, Abbasuddin alias Halal, during the contest for the nomination of the candidate for the in the name of Labour Party for the post of elected mayor, brought in his political father and patron and mentor, Frank Dobbo fucking Dobson. And Frank fucking Dobson had no idea what the fuck he was doing there. So he spoke a lot of rubbish. In any case, Abbasuddin alias Halal was discredited within the community because of his lying. And Lutfur Rahman was selected as the Labour Party candidate. But Abbasuddin alias Halal was not going to let go. So at the very last minute, Abbasuddin alias Halal cooked up a dossier against Lutfur Rahman and submitted that dossier against Lutfur Rahman to what was called the National Executive Committee of the Labour Party at the HQ, Labour Party HQ. But the dossier was discredited in a spectacular way in a private eye issue of the Rotan Baras, which pointed out that Abbasuddin alias Halal was found to have been hiding several allegations of corruption by him over his kind of battle for an upper position in what used to be called the Spitalfields Housing Cooperative. And so the item in private lie was headed Halal Dead Meat. Now remember, Abbasuddin alias Halal changed his name from Abbas to Halal. I have no idea why he did that, but it was not going to be a pleasant experience as a result of his change from Abbas to Halal, because it gave the private eye the phonetic advantage in converting the word Halal into a form of the word Muslim, word Halal and Haram. So he became the equivalent of Haram while posing as the Halal. And he has called in the heading Halal Dead Meat. And he became the dead meat in effect. He didn't get the votes and he didn't become the mayor. So many episodes of the dishonesty on the part of Abbasuddin alias Halal can be counted, but I shall mention only one. When at the beginning of the campaign against the Crossrail hole, I gave him the opportunity. He was in post at the time as the leader of the Labour Group on Town Hrs Council and the leader of the council by definition as well during the first 5 years of the decade. And the Khoodeelaar campaign was just getting off in the decisively victorious journey that we ended up having. I said to him at a conversation that I arranged at my initiative for him, I said to Abbas, I said, তুমি যদি আমরা কথা হলো আর আমরা লগে কোঅপারেট করো তে তোমার লিডারশিপ থাকবো আর কোনো ক্ষতি হইতো না। I said in Siloti to Abbasuddin Ali Salal that if he agreed with the campaign, Khoodeelaar campaign against Crossrail, then we would not focus on him and we would not campaign against him. And in the most unprecedented, unforgettable response, in the most idiotic way, Abbasuddin Ali Salal said, Bhai Sahab, it is party ঠিক করবো। It is the party policy. What he was saying was that this was a party policy, meaning that the support by the regime in Tar Hamlets Council that he fronted was based on the Labour Party's policy. But I gave him the opportunity. But he was going to be behaving like the halal meat, dead meat, wasn't he? So he behaved as the dead meat. And he's still continuing to behave as a dead meat because although he was there in the pictures, I took some of the pictures in the 2009-2010 period of our opposition to the elected mayor post. This is now 13 years later. Abbasuddin Alias Halal has not rebuilt any image of consolidated solidarity with the greater interests of the community, of the cause for democracy, of the cause for accountability. And that is all his fault. Abbasuddin Alias Halal is ignorant, ill-informed, and as it says in the Quran, Holy Quran, he suffers from pettiness of mind. Abbasuddin Ali Salal was involved in benefiting under the superficial pretext of being a local business person at the time, from what used to be called the Bethnal Green City Challenge. Abbasuddin Ali Salal benefited, as did a number of other dishonest individuals who were most unfit for purpose. But that kind of largesse given to most unfit and dishonest cabal or groups of individuals at the expense of the whole community in Bethnal Green was inevitable. So when yesterday, that is Wednesday, in London, the Times newspaper runs the midweek column by the former Conservative MP Matthew Paris. Paris, goes out of his way to ooze solidarity with Michael Heseltine. I have to think about what Michael Heseltine did against the community in Tar Hamlets. Well, Heseltine did the same against the community in Liverpool, Toxteth and all the rest of it. But to the likes of the racist Matthew Paris, Heseltine deserves all the solidarity and congratulations on his 82nd or 81st birthday or whatever. Is it 81? Let's check if I can find the copy of that Times, which is why I have to have the papers handy nearby. Let's see if I can find the copy of the Matthew Perry's column dedicated to the praise of Michael Heseltine. Matthew Perry has got the piece on page 24 of the Times of 29th of March 2023, and the piece is headed Hurrah for Hedza. Last week on this page, my colleague Max Hastings gave a vivid account of Michael, and then he puts within brackets Lord. Fuck them. Heseltine. Vast and joyous 90th birthday. So it's not 81st to 82nd, it's 90th birthday apparently. In the baroque and chandeliered river room of the Savoy Hotel in London, courtesy of the publishing company he founded, Haymarket. But there is something I must add, says Matthew Perry. Max's and my lives take us to lots of swanky do's with posh people in sumptuous surroundings, hired at great expense. In the world of politics and the media, such happenings abound. But Heja's was different. It was family. Look at the fucking supplication. He, that is Heza, his son, his wife, and both his daughters spoke. They talked not about politics, but old times, the things that made them happy. He is from Swansea, that is in Wales, and there was a Welsh male voice choir. There was Happy Birthday to You. There were anecdotes. You would need to change only the incidental things to recreate a remarkably similar family anniversary in a working man's club in Bolsova. Everyone dressed in their best and beer instead of wine. The atmosphere was curiously intimate and, yes, loving. He deserves it. Fuck Matthew Perry. Why is he contrasting the Savoy Hotel with Bolsova? Why? Because Bolsova is where the long-standing critic of Parliament, Labour Party member of Parliament, Dennis Skinner comes from. That is why Bolsover has a stinging invocation in the reference. We shall talk about Matthew Perry another time because he is sick-makingly a self-confessed liar and a racist and a supporter of Crossrail and supporter of Una King and an opponent of the Bangladeshi community and especially an opponent of the campaign against the Crossrail hole. I led the campaign, and there is no way that Matthew Perry could stop the campaign, no matter how hostile he was. And the entirety of the Fleet Street and the media was very unsympathetic to us because they took their kind of lines from the bureaucrats at the transport at the expense of transport in the department and the crooks. Now, just incidentally, the way to stop the HS2, which we shall be talking about HS2 when we examine Rishi Sunak's role, not in this edition but later. HS2 can be stopped if the campaigners are genuine and are determined and have the knowledge and the commitment. The campaigners so far that have been against HS2. HS2 is high speed rail line that billions and billions. They can only succeed in stopping HS2 by following what we created in Tower Hamlets. We created a political heat that was to completely unravel the Labour Party leadership on the Tower Hamlets Council. Not only was Abbasuddin alias Halal completely disorganized and disintegrated, but the entirety of the councillors on Tower Hamlets Council at the time was completely left without any option. They didn't know what to do and they didn't know what not to do. And what happened was that we focused on their future. Now it shows the pettiness of these individuals as careerists. And their future was in their being re-elected as councillors. That is the limits of the horizon. So we threatened that. We said that they will not be elected again. And they had not got the morality and the ethics to publicly question any of our arguments. In any case, all our arguments are fact-based, truthful, honest. And the fact that I was doing the campaign and not trying to become a candidate for any post politically enhanced the integrity of the campaign. So if the people who are campaigning allegedly against HS2 want to stop the HS2, then along the line from London to Birmingham so far, they can choose a number of political constituencies where members of parliament are going to seek re-election. And if they threaten those MPs with defeat at the election whenever it is caused, and if they do the same thing with the local councillors, on condition that the councillors and the members of parliament sitting currently must openly denounce HS2 and oppose HS2 now, that would achieve the kind of results that are needed to stop the HS2. And I think that we did that in Tower Hamlets most effectively. And the lesson can be applied elsewhere, as I said, as is the case topically now about HS2, stopping the HS2. Going back to the mayoral system, when on the 10th of June 2010, remember 10th of June 2010 was still a time before the Labour Party in Tower Hamlets decided as to who would be their official candidate for the post of elected mayor. And on the 10th of June, Abbasuddin alias Halal organized a meeting at the Toynbee Hall at 28 Commercial Street, not Commercial Road, 28 Commercial Street, London E1. He organized the meeting. Can you believe that he was organizing that meeting in Tower Hamlets under the banner of the name of the village he came from in Balagonj area in Silot? What was that about? That was about the stupidity on the part of Abbasuddin alias Halal. I was there dutifully as the investigative campaigning organizer to observe the evidence. And there were people, as many as the small room could accommodate. And Abbasuddin Elias Halal called almost every single one. So there were about 50 people, or that kind of number, that Abbasuddin Elias Halal called to speak on behalf of the village or the area in Balagonj to vote for Abbasuddin Elias Halal. The only person he left out was me. Now, how did he think that I would need a platform to be given to me by him? I never would need that platform, would I? I have been doing action politics since before, whenever he was born, I don't know. But I could say that since before he was, if he was born in the 1950s, let's say, then since before he left the stage of being a toddler. And I have been able to use platforms based on the ability, the credibility, and the evidence of the morality that I represent and I've always represented. And I don't need any platform being given as a bribe or as a kind of reward by anyone, least of all by Abbasuddin Ali Salal. But what was to happen, I didn't know that. But when he called another speaker, who is no longer a councillor but was a councillor at the time, I think, or was going to be a councillor, this speaker, instead of saying anything about the village, he said that he, this particular speaker, owed his understanding of the community's needs and his understanding of the campaigning tactics and approaches from his teacher. And he named me as his teacher, which is factually absolutely true. I spent 7 years tutoring this boy and another few. 7 years of my life. Nobody else has that background. So that actually exposed Abbasuddin as Halal, the complete, absolutely insulting idiot. Now, a few minutes after I left the Toynbee Hall, I went to the venue at the East London Mosque on the same day, few minutes later, where Lutfur Rahman was being given the platform by his handlers that operate from the base at the London Muslim Center and the East London Mosque. And when I attempted to take the picture of Lutfur Rahman, a thug came from behind and pushed me. I don't know who the thug was, but I immediately told Abjol Mia what had happened. And Abjol Mia did not take any action, did not apologize to me, nor did Lutfur Rahman. So these are the fish market, corrupt, lowest common denominator standards of the candidates and their supporters, which is one of the reasons why I had to oppose the corrupt system of elected mayor being foisted on the people of Tower Hamlets in the name of the people of Tower Hamlets. And it goes on. What happened when the Price Waterhouse Coopers were kind of appointed by then Community Secretary Eric the Pickles to investigate the financial affairs of the regime fronted by Lutfur Rahman as the incumbent mayor. PricewaterhouseCoopers revealed a litany of lies, dishonesty, inappropriate behavior by Lutfur Rahman, who ignored the sound advice that was given by the minority of the employees that did have the courage to give him the advice that he should not be giving money to criminals. But Lutfur Rahman ignored the advice and he gave the money to the criminals and he made the resources and properties belonging to Tamil Council, that is the public, to crooks and criminals and mates. Now, Lutfur Rahman has not been prosecuted for any of the crimes that have been alleged against him. Now, to those who claim that he is over the allegations, let me just say this, that no crime is past. There is no time limit when a crime can become no longer actionable. We shall come to the details of Lutfur Rahman's crimes and criminality in the essay or essays that will be broadcast in due course. My experience of Lutfur Rahman's unfitness firsthand, of course, is based on the face-to-face occasions that I attempted to tell him to behave in accordance with the law, in accordance with the due process, in accordance with the requirements of morality, ethics, and constitutionality. Lutfur Rahman is a liar. And also, as I have explained about the October 2010 so-called hustings held at the Business Development Center in the Greater X Street, shortly before the election, the first election, to the post of mayor, Lutfur Rahman has got serious intellectual defects, what is called the cognitive limitations or cognitive challenges. I have explained and described how he misunderstood the question put to him at the hustings by the London Evening Standard reporter David Cohen. David Cohen put the question to Lutfur Rahman about a claim by the outlet called London Bangla suggesting or alleging that Abbasuddin alias Halal had beaten up his former wife. I mean, David Cohen could not make that question clearer. But instead of answering that question, either saying that he condemned that kind of assertion about Abbasuddin alias Halal or not, Lutfur Rahman said that he, Lutfur Rahman, had never beaten up his wife. How could that be? How could he make that statement based on the question about Abbasuddin alias Halal that David Cohen had asked him? Lutfur Rahman could only do that if Lutfur Rahman had intellectual difficulty in understanding the question that David Cohen had put to him. That was not just the only occasion. When on the 3rd of July 2013, Lutfur Rahman chaired the so-called cabinet of Tower Hamlets Council, my written question containing 222 words, it had been circulated in advance to him and to others that would attend the meeting so that they could prepare themselves mentally, intellectually, evidentially, factually, and legally to answer my question, which was 222 words long. Lutfur Rahman commented after I had read it out at the meeting that the question was understandable when I read it. He suggested that it wasn't understandable in the written form, which I repeated exactly as I had written the question. And then on the 29th, well, then before that is 29th of October 2010, before the end of the year, end of the first week since the first election, I asked Lutfur Rahman to sit down with me so that I could advise him as to some urgent issues that he needed to address in order to stop the crooks in the Towners Council making things worse for the community. Lutfur Rahman said repeatedly in Siloti, and it is on the record, that he needed to settle down in the newly installed post, and then he would sit down with me. That was 13 calendar years ago, 14 calendar years. He has not sat down with me to discuss those things. When I had arranged a meeting to get Lutfur Rahman to address all the outstanding issues based on the evidence of the crooks making the corrupt decision in the council, he sat with me, but he sat without the officials. He sat with me accompanied by somebody called Khalam Chowdhury, who was not an official of the council, and somebody called Muhammad Jubair, who was not an official of the council. Now that shows that Lutfur Rahman was not only dishonest, corrupt, but was also fundamentally, shockingly ignorant about the legal duties. As the incumbent in the post of mayor, he should not have met me without the attendance of council employees to record the meeting and to advise him appropriately. He didn't do either. And it goes on. Muhammad Jubair, on another occasion, thought that I was there to be given a cup of tea. He brought a cup of tea and said, "It has been made specially for you." Now, how bad and how stupid are these people? How stupid! Now, how could Lutfur Rahman then appoint the same Zubair as the head of his strategies after getting back in on the 5th of May 2022? What could Zubair do strategically? He doesn't have the slightest clue as to the strategy. So we shall be ending this particular edition at 0741 hours GMT, which is 0841 hours British Standard Time on Thursday, the 30th of March 2023. And we shall continue all of these topics and more in due course in the editions that follow. This has been 1 hour and just 9 minutes, I would say.